All right, joining us today on this episode of Biz on the Balcony, we have the president of InsideSTL, the host of the Ryan Kelly Morning After on 590 The Fan, and of course the host of the Tim McKernan Show podcast on the InsideSTL podcast network, the one and only Tim McKernan. Tim, what's
Hi,
up,
boys.
man?
Hey, what's up? It's great to see both of you.
Absolutely. It's awesome to see you. Obviously being here and getting to see, I haven't seen the new studios yet since you guys moved,
hadn't
actually.
seen the new studio?
I haven't. I've been in like once in the lobby area, but I haven't actually been in the,
the new digs.
The new digs, yeah.
The new old digs now?
Yeah.
Been here for how long?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
August 17, yeah.
Nice, that's awesome. So appreciate you joining us, man. We kind of started this Biz on the Balcony thing. It's kind of a fun little, getting in the minds of some of the business people and the entrepreneurs. I mean, especially in what you guys do, an interesting business of not just radio and the behind the scenes of that, but then the podcast. Let's get started with InsideSTL. I mean, when you guys first started, where did the idea come from? Was it only you, or did you kind of have other people branching in to come up with it?
I was killing a non-compete from KMOV when I was weekend sports anchor and reporter there in 2005. And I'm like, man, this radio show, we started the Morning Grind in 2004, and I'm like, this thing's got a following. And I thought about because I actually got the idea from Jim Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, he has this website where he then redirects all of his audience to the website. At the time, it was a website. And I think it was jimrome.com. And I'm like, we ought to do that with the Morning Grind. And I'll call it the morninggrind.com. And Matt Seebeck contacted me. And I didn't know Matt. I don't know what he is, maybe like 7 years younger than me, I guess. And he was a listener of the show, and he was interested in building the site. I had no, IT background whatsoever, and he was interested in building the site. So we did it together, 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad, for whatever reason, I don't know whose idea this was, but to not call it themorninggrind.com, because I didn't own the Morning Grind.
Sure.
I didn't own the content. I didn't own the name. And so I asked some friends what they would call it, and I believe it was my brother who came up with the name InsideSTL, and it just clicked. And then I immediately went to GoDaddy.com.
Yeah.
I think I bought the domain for like $14.95.
There you go.
It's just the best.
And now you can you can come up with the most asinine name right now, and the domain is already bought.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Because I have another thing that I'm working on right now, and I'm working on what to call the business, and so I'm bouncing this off of a couple of people, and we go and look at the domain, and then this guy who would be much more acclimated in that world goes, oh, God, that one's owned by a Ukrainian, and they're the toughest broker guys to negotiate with. And I go, really? It's known who the toughest nationalities are to negotiate? This one's owned by an Australian. They're more reasonable. I go, what in the world is this? But they're all like, even you wouldn't even think of some of these names that we're coming up with, and they're owned, and then it's like, this guy wants, this one's going to be at least six figures just for the domain name. Sure. Like if you want a
That's
.com.
wild.
Yeah, right. .com, yeah.
So InsideSTL.com in 2005 was available, and I bought it up. And I specifically remember thinking, like on the off chance this thing takes, because I was just killing a 1 year non-compete, and I still had like 6 months left in it. I'm like, it'd be good to write a journal just to like keep track of the things that that wind up happening with this thing. And I didn't do it, and I really wish I would have, because you learn so much, like you guys, I'm sure from the beginning to where you are now, you're like, oh my God, if I would have known that.
Yeah.
And it's been almost 15 years now, and the things that you learn, when I was in my 27, I guess, when I started it, 28, that you're just in a different world. And some of these things are really basic that you should know at this point. And I look back and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know them. But yeah, that's how it started. It was me and Matt Seebeck, 50-50.
That's interesting. So when you guys started it, you mentioned being a home, and it still is the home for Ryan Kelly
the
Morning
audio,
After clips. So what else did you have in mind, I guess, for the website going into it?
Two main things. Something that now would be absolutely obsolete, probably has been obsolete for almost a decade at this point, and that was pictures of people at bars, clubs, which at the time, like you had the Ladue News in a Live magazine in St. Louis Magazine, and it'd be like what everybody would flip to. Again, this is 2005, would be those pictures of people out. So we're like, why don't we do that? And then we can do it online. And then people will be able to see it more regularly as opposed to waiting for the publication. I mean, to think that this was 15 years ago, but it sounds like something from like 2 centuries ago. and then secondarily a message board. So which are kind of obsolete now, unless you're using Reddit or going on Tigerboard, where I know Nick's a regular.
Nick I'm all over that.
All kinds of handles.
He's got some weird handle. What's that guy the Plowhawk hates? It's like
Emoji Man.
Emoji Man. That's that's Nick for sure.
That is definitely Nick. So those two things are kind of what social media have turned into and have made irrelevant. But at that time, those were the reasons, in addition to the morning grind. It was the morning grind, then audio, and then I wrote a column every night for like a decade, Monday through Friday, Sunday. Yeah,
really?
It's just kind of like the podcast. I'm like, people expect new guests at the start of the week every week, and we've done that for 2.5 years almost now. And I did the same thing with the website. It was almost like OCD behavior. Like, I got to do it,
right?
Even though if I had nothing to write.
We're trying to get into the blogging thing, man. It's tough. It's like you got to be so consistent. And I'm like, I wrote a blog last week, but it was like 15 days ago. It's crazy.
I'm told it works. I don't know. I truly don't, since we haven't really done much with InsideSTL since coming here. We just have it as a place to host the audio. But I'm told, you look at the Barstool model.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Sure.
So there's got to be a method to it. But for what we do, it's just not something. I just have zero. Here's why. I can't sit down and give a take if I really don't feel it.
Sure.
I'm just not there. I really wasn't there 10 years ago either, but I'm certainly not there now, where I can get like really worked up about something.
Right. Like the Cardinals lineup in the middle of June.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
But during the Blues run, I could have written every single day, and I
Sure.
probably could have written a few times a day. Missouri in 07 or 08 or 13 or 14, I could have gotten into that. A lot of these Cardinal runs, I certainly can get into that. But like at this point right now, like I always say to the Cat and Doug sometimes in a commercial break, I should say, like if we worked at 101 where you had to talk sports, I don't know how we would do it.
It'd be so boring.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't have any interest, and that's not a shot at 101. It's their format. I
Sure.
get it, and I'm sure they're looking at whatever the hell it is that we do. What are these guys doing? But I couldn't do that because I just don't feel that strongly about that stuff. I just don't.
Well, and then it doesn't. It's things that intrigue you too. It's like everyday life. You don't know where. Like you guys have the show where you guys just come in and just bullshit, and that's the way you want to do it because the average listener out there. I mean, like you said before on the radio that there's some guys that enjoy the hot take sports stuff, and there's a lot out there. But there's also people that don't enjoy listening to Cardinal talk for 3 hours when, again, it's the middle of the season.
I think anybody wants to hear Cardinal talk for 3 hours.
Well, I mean, it's narrowcasting, which is the exact opposite of what we're all taught, which is broadcasting. And so if you're reaching a sliver of the audience, in my opinion, you're not doing your job.
Right.
But what your job is subjective based on what you think it is, and then objective based on what the station or the media entity that you work for dictates what your job is. And from my standpoint, the job is to generate a return on investment for our advertisers, and therefore you want to reach as many people as possible to increase the probability of generating that return. And so if we were just to do that, it'd be hideously boring. To me, it would be.
Sure.
So we kind of had this mindset a few years ago that we are only going to talk about the stuff that at least one of us is engaged in. And that's not just me, Doug, or the Cat, or Jay, or Charlie, if they're filling in, but, Iggy, the Plowhawk, Pete. If one of us, at least, of the six is engaged in the topic, we know that there's going to be a response.
Sure.
But if you do that kind of surface level, and I don't know if you guys have ever been in the spot where you've done it, I've definitely done it. I haven't done it in a number of years, where you're like on the air, but you're just like lobbing vanilla noise back and forth of just like, the Blues play tonight against the Ducks. Blues in first place in the West, and boy, the Ducks have lost 3 in a row. And then you go, the Ducks are used to them being a pretty good team, but they've really been struggling lately. And then look, the Kings are also used to them being good too, and the Sharks, and they're at the bottom of the Pacific as well. And then it's like, okay, now I got to carry the ball for the next 15 seconds, and we're saying nothing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I had in 2007 when Martin had quit and the Cat got fired. And it used to be where we could fill, without a commercial, we could do 5 hours if we needed to, effortlessly. And then it was like I would look at the clock and I go, oh my God, I got 6 minutes till I have a commercial break, and I have no idea how I'm going to get from here to there.
Right.
And to me, the best kind of broadcasting, podcasting, whatever, is when you're like, man, I didn't even realize we went 2 hours. I feel badly I took 2 hours of your time, but we were just kind of
having
drifting.
fun. Just talking.
That's the best. That's the best. To me, that's the best.
Oh, yeah.
And your audience is someone that's very loyal, and your show is obviously very listener heavy in terms of the text messages, the emails. How has that been? Because it's kind of been like that throughout the process, or throughout the Morning Grind and the Morning After.
Yeah, that's. I think that's relatively unique. It wasn't intended. The Morning Grind was intentional. There was a formula, so to speak. I remember going to the gentleman who at the time was the head of programming for Clear Channel, which is now iHeartMedia, and I think it was on some Rams trip. It might have been Rams and Patriots in Foxborough, and then they would wind up playing each other in the Super Bowl a couple months later. And I remember emailing him and saying, "Hey, what about a sports show that's not really a sports show, but that appeals to younger people? Because right now, yeah, there's sports talk radio, but it's like the shit that we were just making reference to. Yeah, and I'm like, that doesn't appeal to that many people. I mean, it does, but they're older." And he's like, "I like the idea." This guy had kind of taken a liking to what we did, or what I did, I guess, on television, but he's like, "Yeah, we're not in a position to do that." And so KFNS came along and put me with Jay Randolph Jr. or Rich Gould, which I'm sure to people right now go, "Oh my God, that would be hilarious." But I mean, I was 25 or 6. I mean, I guess, what are you, Nick?
25.
Yeah, so I'm in your age range. You don't come in when you're working with guys who've been doing it for a long time like you run the thing. I mean, you're kind of in a subservient role.
Sure.
And I didn't come in with like these ideas. I'm kind of like, I'll just get along, And Rich certainly wasn't really all that active in the preparation process. I'm sure it's alarming. And I think Jay was like, this guy's here because his dad's general sales manager, so kind of that going also. So I started working with Frank Cusimano for about a year, and when Frank would be on trips, I would bring the Cat and Martin in to fill in. And it just worked. And Frank's show is still called The Press Box. It was called The Press Box then. And we jokingly would call it The Sandbox, because that's what, like, his older listeners, when I would be running point, and Martin and the Cat would come in, they'd go, "These guys, they're just playing around, Frank. It's a sandbox." And so we're like, "Oh, good. We'll call it The Sandbox."
The Sandbox.
To, like, piss them off even more.
Right.
But then this new ownership group came in, they go, "Whatever that thing is that you guys do when Frank's out of town, that needs to be the new morning drive show."
Wow.
And that's how the thing started. And they paid us enough. They paid me enough anyway, where I could go, "Okay, I hate doing TV as it is. I'm making more now from radio. I can leave TV," and so I left TV, which then is why I had the non-compete, because I was out of TV for a year, which is how InsideSTL came about. And that message board, in addition to emails, I wanted people's feedback at that time. You didn't have Twitter, you didn't have Facebook. I guess Facebook existed, but that was the way to do it. And we didn't have a text inbox either. And so I always valued that. And to me, it always struck me as obvious. I remember seeing an interview with Mark Cuban, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, where he said, "I answer every email I get," and which might have been the case at the time. I can't imagine he does now. And I just thought, and I still do it to this day, unless it's just like somebody just like going out of their way to be mean-spirited, and it's kind of pointless.
Which is bullshit, but it happens.
Yeah, it'll happen, but it doesn't happen as much as it used to. If they take the time to write, then I want to make sure I respond. I feel horribly if I miss one that goes to like junk email, and they're like, "Oh, he didn't respond." But I want to respond, because if they take the time to write, then I feel like I owe them at the very least 30 seconds at the least to respond, because they make our ability to do this. I mean, they're like my, if I was a political candidate, they're my donors, they're my voters, they're my supporters. So I have to make sure I respond. So I always did that, and it's just evolved with social media and with the text inbox. And as it turns out, so many of these people who write in wind up being incredibly more talented than the people actually hosting the show. I mean, these guys are brilliant writers, And so I guess inadvertently the audience feels a part of it, as they should, by the way, because they go out of the way to support the advertisers, and they go out of the way to create their own content.
When you guys, went with the show at first, did you guys know how big, as in like the audience would get, and at the point where they would, buy into the show the way they have, like you were talking about, getting involved, the emails, the text, but then coming out to the events and supporting? I mean, could you guys imagine when you started that, okay, we got something that could build for 15 years?
Never, ever, ever, ever. Never, ever, never. I mean, didn't even know how it could. And probably I think we were just happy to be making, because we all were TV guys when we started it. And it was just kind of like another way to make some, like, supplement our income. And then all of a sudden it became a decent income. And then you're like, oh, this is nice. Now, Martin was a sports director. Cat was on Fox Sports Midwest. But I was the number 3 guy at KMOV. I really didn't like it. It was my dream job. And then after a couple of years, I'm just like, God, this just kind of sucks. You're just kind of boxed in, reading off the prompter. If you skew a little into something like that would be coloring outside the lines, you'd get some pushback. The people at KMOV, not the people, but a couple of people are just like, hey, we appreciate what you do. And I did, I won Emmys, and Edward R. Murrow won an Edward R. Murrow Award. And so they appreciated what I did, but I was the number 3 guy. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter to the bottom line.
Right.
But when you're from St. Louis and you're working your hometown station, you have delusions of your importance that really aren't realistic. In other words, I leave, it's not going to impact their bottom line in any way outside of if they hire somebody for like $15,000 less, then they probably just netted $15,000.
Right.
Because it's not like people are buying KMOV to buy me. So, it's you don't realize that at the time. Now I look back on it and I go, God, I was... But you're working nights, you're working weekends. It's all the stuff you need to do coming up.
Right.
And you're working holidays. And I didn't enjoy it because I didn't see any growth. And I also saw what was going on with television. And this is in 2005, that it was declining in its relevance. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you guys watch local?
No, I mean,
people like Hannah and some of your peers from
a few of my peers, and I think that was something, especially when I was interning, even that I think you told me, Charlie told me, Frank told me, and Doug told me. Yeah. When I said, I want to do TV sports, and all 4 of you guys said, no, don't do TV sports. No way. And that was kind of a realization that I had when I was still at KOMU, like. I think I still had a year left when I was interning for InsideSTL in 590 or 920, I guess, at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, came to this realization and saw kind of where it was going. All my buddies are doing TV sports and made the decision, get out of it. And that's when I, came back to work after college. And I think there's maybe one guy that's still in TV sports.
Yeah.
Everybody's left.
And I can't imagine anybody telling you it's a good business.
Right.
Anybody. And so from that standpoint, there was kind of this dogma, and I guess there still is, although it's certainly less than there was in 2005, that if you really want to reach people, you got to be on television.
Right.
And it's just not true. I don't know what else to say outside of it's just not true. I mean, right now, if you could buy stock in a local television sports department or buy stock in Barstool, what are you going to buy?
Yeah,
and anybody who would tell you the former just is out of touch.
Right.
So the way to make money, I think, in this industry now, with the exception of a sliver, is to do essentially what you guys are doing, which is own your own content and build from there. I remember when I had an opportunity to leave, I had a few opportunities to leave St. Louis, but the one that I really sweated was going to New York, and I took the job at SNY, and I remember when I was thinking about it, and this is really what I thought, and it's the truth. I hope it doesn't come off like in a weird way, but I didn't really want it. But I'm like, okay, this has put me on a path to like Sports Center, and I didn't really want to do that either. And I'm like, okay, if I want to make $1 million, how many people as sportscasters make $1 million in the country? And the number I kind of came to is 30. Now, this is 2007, and I'm just like 15 of those are going to be in that spot for years to come. Al Michaels, Bob Costas, Joe Buck. A handful would be sports directors in either New York or LA. And so it's like I'm playing for one of 5 or 7 spots, and the job paid a nice amount of money if you're in St. Louis, but not in New York. And I remember talking to the person who I was going to be replacing, Steve Berthium, who had been on ESPN at the time. Now he's the Diamondbacks broadcaster. And he goes, "Are you happy?" And I go, "What do you mean?" I just started talking to this guy, and I know him from ESPN. And he goes, "Well, are you happy?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, there's your answer." And I'm in St. Louis at the time. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Don't fuck with happiness."
Yeah.
He goes, "It's just there's no reason to do it." And it's kind of like, I don't know how old he was. I would imagine right around 40. But you have perspective that you learn that it's like, because you kind of get to a point, I think we did at the University of Missouri, where it's like I started in Little Rock, but most people started, like Gabe Yarman started in South Dakota.
North Dakota, right.
And then you got to go there, and then maybe you get up to like AA ball or AAA ball, and then you hope
I went to Quincy for news.
Yeah, I remember that.
Very
quick. Yeah, you're miserable. Yeah.
It was terrible. And I gave it my all. That's the thing, and I talked to my dad about my career all the time and how it's veered, and I just told him I freaked out coming out of college. I said right away, I have to get the first job that I get offered. If it's good money and I can get my own place, I'm a grown-up now, I have to do it. And I rushed into it, and you sign a contract, and you're fucked. And because you're sitting there unhappy, But I'm one of those guys you got to make a move, and I won't make that mistake again. Yeah. But it's the same way with TV, where I figured right away. I think I went to a city council meeting, and I came back.
City council beat.
When I came back one day, and they basically told me, interview the mayor if there's something interesting, follow up on it. Well, I was listening, and I didn't find anything that was record-breaking or anything, so I didn't follow up with anything, and I got scolded and bitched at coming back to the station. And I'm like, okay, obviously this isn't me. So, that's the same TV thing you're talking about.
It's miserable. It's miserable. And I can't, and I realize if you were to talk to any of the people still working in TV, they couldn't say this on your show, and I understand why. I mean, they're getting paychecks from there, and pensions and health insurance and 401ks. I understand it. But I remember Mike Bush was in on the podcast, and I hadn't seen him in a number of years, but we were both in sports at the same time. Now he's news guy. And I remember him saying, I think it was afterward, you might have been in the studio, Nick.
Yeah, I was in there.
And he goes, how did you know?
Yeah.
As in, how did I know in 2005 that, to sell stock essentially in local TV?
Yeah.
And I think I did say to him, well, how did you not know? But he was in a different spot.
He was higher up.
I mean, he was a news anchor by 2005 when I left.
Yeah.
So you still can be in the spot and recognize that it's going down. See, for people, we make the joke about the AM radio thing, but I don't think I would want to go. I mean, I know kind of what the scale would be right now if I were to go to an FM station. It's just part of the joke of the show is that we downplay because it's an AM radio station.
Right.
But shit, I would rather own my own shit.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when we have a following and built-in advertisers at this point, than go take a paycheck. And, I mean, if you have to do it, you have to do it. But I'm just not that, if this ended, I'd just be like, okay, fuck it, I'm moving to Jupiter, and I'll figure. And then that's kind of where I am. So I gotta be I love the fact that I can go to work dressed like I am, and for the people who aren't viewing this, I'm dressed like a hoodlum. I never wear suits unless I'm going to a wedding or a funeral.
Yeah.
And I just have zero interest in anybody knowing who I am at all. I mean, it's flattering when people do because it means they listen to the show, and that's cool. But I think there are some people, I guess, I love Howard Stern. Everything throughout the show is kind of based on that format at that time. And he talks about loving being famous. Now, granted, he is in, his own universe there. I'm in a 0.000001, and I'm in St. Louis. But still, I hate it. I would, if something ever did happen where it got really big, I would really, I'm envious of people who have money, but nobody knows who they are.
Right.
That's my specific desire of indirect correlation, where people aren't writing about our business, oftentimes inaccurately. But usually when people are writing about you, you make so much money, whether you be an athlete, musician, entertainer, politician, that you're just like, okay, fuck it. That's what and don't get me wrong, I've done okay, but it's not like in the multi-million dollars where you just go, okay, who fucking cares? They can say whatever they want about me or my personal life, or that I'm difficult on set, or there's a scandal in my congressional office, whatever. I'm a multi-millionaire. In this case, sometimes it's a little irritating because people, think they know what's going on, but then you can't necessarily say because then you're violating the omerta, so to speak, of the locker room.
Right. Well, you guys have been through some bullshit too. I mean,
yeah, we really have.
You really have. And then you guys bet on yourselves, especially when we went to 920 after, the man and the woman stuff.
Yeah. Nick thought that was really going to work too. I don't know.
I really
did.
Hit him like a bolt of lightning, I heard. Yeah. So I mean, you guys bet on yourselves, and I got a chance to get in there and see a lot of it and be part of it, and it was a blast. And you guys gave me my first shot to really, try to build my career.
Well, you're talented. I wouldn't have given you a shot if I thought you were some dipshit.
Don't boost it.
You can edit that out,
Nick.
No, save that, please. We'll play it forever. Yeah, we'll do that.
Do not boost it, ego.
But I really appreciated it, and I enjoyed the time because I saw that you guys, and we didn't know this seeing it, but you had to run the business part of it, and you had to be on the air and do the show, and you are also doing the Edmonds show too. So
yeah, that was rough.
You went in there, and as you said on the podcast a million times, that it was just deteriorating you, and you're sitting there though and building. And you guys have now earned a spot where you're just got a consistent audience, you're bringing revenue, and as you mentioned, you guys own your own shit, which is just what it's all about.
Yeah, we own all of our stuff dating back to 2010, and that to me was a defining moment in this whole thing, because I was offered afternoon drive at KFNS at the end of 2009. But if I were doing afternoons, that means Doug and the Cat couldn't come because of their television jobs. And it was a decent, it was a good amount of money. I shouldn't say decent. It was a very good amount of money, more than I had ever made. From one job anyway. And 1380 was reliant on our show, and 1380 was owned by Simmons Media. Great people, by the way, big time great people, smart radio people, not based in St. Louis, I think out of Salt Lake City. And their counter was, we can't pay you guys. We can't pay you what you're offered there. But if you want, you can own all of the advertising time, all of the commercials, all the spots, all the sponsorships, and keep it. And if you want to do that, we can't pay you, but you can have that time. And so it's a decision. I mean, that's a real, because you have X amount of dollars, which is, a nice amount of money, and $0. And on top of that, I'm paying Doug, I'm paying the cat, I'm paying producer Joe, and my staff at InsideSTL, which wasn't like it was 20 people, but there were a few people, and rent and insurance. And I remember calling my father, who was general sales manager both at KFNS and also at KPLR years before that, and I said, Dad, I got this choice here. And he was selling InsideSTL with me, and Melissa Marr, who is still at KFNS now. And I said, I got this guaranteed thing here from KFNS, or I can sell our own stuff at 1380. What do you think? And he said, Timmy, they're both shitholes. He goes, but if I got to be in a shithole, I'd rather control my own destiny.
All right.
And I go, so you're saying pass on the 590 thing? And he goes, pass on the 590 thing.
Wow.
We'll make this 1380 thing work. And we did. I mean, I knew what the number had. The number had to go up about 2.25x from what we had been billing. To cover our expenses, and we more than did it. I remember 590 being stunned that I turned it down because I would have been the highest paid employee, and they're just like, and I said, there's no need to even up it, even if you want to, because I'm just not doing it. I'm just not doing it because I want to keep the group together.
Sure.
The group is what makes the thing work. People can have their favorites on the show, and everybody does, and people have their least favorites. But I know from having done it that it's the group. And I can never get caught up in, oh man, Tim, the joke that Tim, you're the best, or Doug's the funniest thing. And Doug may be the funniest thing in the world. But if you don't have the group, the thing isn't as strong. And inevitably, especially it's probably going to be me, because I'm the youngest of the group, of the hosts anyway, it won't all stay together. And that time will come probably within 5 years. But while we have it, and it's so easy and everybody gets along, you just can't take it for granted. Because I did have that brief time when Martin had quit in 2006 and the cat got fired at the start of 2007, where I had about 6 months where it wasn't the group and producer Joe wasn't there. And I remember that's what I was talking about. Yeah. I said, I'm looking at the clock going, how am I going to get from 7:54 to 8 o'clock? Right. I don't have anything, and I know nobody else in the studio does either, so this is going to be rough. And we took for granted how fortunate we were to have this chemistry, certainly, but also the fact that we would amuse each other, be comfortable enough with each other to give each other shit. And we make jokes about the getting hit by lightning, and that certainly does deserve all the jokes that it can possibly get. But I felt like I was kind of lucky enough to get struck one time with what happened with the morning grind, much less to get it twice with this.
Right.
Getting it a third time is highly unlikely, because there's that chemistry and everybody gets along and kind of understands that if you fuck with one of us, you fuck with all of us,
Yeah. And people are starting to understand that too, I think, and that's why you guys have just made, especially with younger listeners too, as you mentioned, the audience I think could have changed from the start of the show till now. I listen daily whenever I get a chance. I podcast like crazy. So I think, when it's mid-20s, you guys have content that can work with any age group.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't know how that happened. Yeah. I really don't know how that happened. I hear the podcast is the reason.
Podcasting for sure.
I'm certainly aware of it, because it's like, for me, I guess at this point, Stern's 65, but I don't maybe I'm wrong. Do you guys listen to him? Or is that at your age?
I haven't listened much of
video clips. That's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stuff.
I love his interviews. I don't listen to like the stuff that I think made him famous, probably, which was kind of like the porn stuff or the bad shit, kind of like Iggy-like characters.
I've seen his movie. I mean, I loved it. It was good.
Yeah, and that was a huge influence on me in a major way. But that the audience is still, he's 22 years older than me, and I still think the absolute. And I'll be depressed when that show goes away.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But how our audience has gotten younger, even though Doug's in his 60s, the cat's in his 50s, I'm in my 40s. I have no idea. Iggy's in his 60s. Pete's in his late 30s, Plowhawk's 30, but yet our audience, I think, if you probably got a median age of it, it'd probably be like at 32 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't have an explanation for it. It's great that it is that way. I have no idea why.
Have you ever thought, and this might be something, off the record type thing, but when the show, as you mentioned, does come to an end eventually, and you mentioned the age differences and everything, when Doug hangs it up, whenever he retires from TV and radio, the cat the same way, do you ever think of like adjusting it where like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I'm just going to step away from radio, or I'm going to totally make a change and try to get another group? It's never probably going to be that, but maybe start another show while I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd probably just be a piece by piece thing if I continue to do it.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that I would continue to do it. I mean, like I said, I'm working on other things now, and if one of them were to hit, I'd probably, I'd honor my contract or whatever, but then I'd be on my way.
Yeah.
I'm not consumed with like, nor do I think the world needs to hear my voice on a regular basis, but nor do I really want it either. I see what I think is going on with like Barstool and InsideSTL started at the same time. And what Dave, and I don't know Dave, Young Page Views is like obsessed, but he really wants us to meet. And just bullshit. Obviously, he's built. I don't even know what the thing's worth at this point. 9 figures.
Crazy.
Yeah,
so I mean, it's absurd. But what he has to continue to do, and I could do that. Like what Clay does. I know you have a rapport with Clay, and I had Clay in here, and I respect what he does, even though I don't necessarily follow his content. I don't have an interest in doing that. I guess I could do it. I don't have an interest in, like, almost like
you
playing.
You mean what
like,
Clay is doing every day?
Yeah, like kind of a Vince McMahon thing. And I get it. It makes a lot. To me, it's just not like when I'm saying something, I truly think it.
Sure.
And I don't have any interest in like going over the top, like it just isn't who I am.
Well, that's how Portnoy is too, though. He says what he thinks, and he might play up a little bit.
But there's got to be an element of like hyperbolic behavior there. I think.
Sure.
But I don't. But at the same time, I don't know. I've never met him. I did meet Clay, and were you in when we were doing the Clay interview?
Yeah.
You were in there video?
I was there later on in the evening.
Okay.
I wasn't there for the actual interview.
So we interviewed him, and I guess we didn't have video of that. I don't think. It was like one of our very first interviews in the podcast. It was October 17, and I don't know how to, like, I guess the questions weren't like, what do you think of Missouri and the SEC or any of that type of stuff. It was like, there was one article, and you might know what it was, Nick, and I can't recall. I know Will Leach was quoted, and a bunch of people were quoted as being critical of him, saying he's kind of sold his soul to the devil.
Oh, yeah.
And so I asked him about a number of those quotes, and then his wife was kind of critical of what he's done, and then like the day that Trump was elected, how he goes, this is, not good for the country, but this is great for me, or something like that.
He was catching a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, and so I asked him about those things. And we had a really good exchange. We didn't get to go as long as we put, but I saw him later that night at Kirkwood Brewhouse, and he goes, "You asked incredible questions." And to me, they just struck me as the obvious questions, because part of me goes, I think he gets how to play the social media game, and he's really smart. But I'm not interested in. Like, I can see how to do it, but I'm not interested in
doing that every day. Yeah, he's doing multiple videos a day.
I did after the Cardinals and their playoff games.
Yeah, you did the post-game shows.
But I have things to say then. But if you're like, okay, you can make an extra whatever, I don't know, something to be like another 5%. So not something that will be materially, but another 5% of what I make right now. To do that, that wouldn't make sense. Like 20% to do that after every Cardinal game this year. I'd be like, there's no way.
Yeah,
there's enough substance there for it.
I couldn't do it.
The audience would pick it up too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, there are people most of the time in their 20s. I'm a married father.
Got other things going on.
Yeah, it's just not. It just. And I remember saying to Doug, like my first year at KMOV, and he goes, "What's wrong?" And I go, "Well, the Cardinals lost." Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Because Doug at that time was older than I am now,
he's just like,
and he had to be like, "Oh no, this guy's like really fucked up." Like, it was April. It was April too. This wasn't like the end of the postseason. This was April. And they'd blown a lead in Houston, and I'm like. He goes, "What's wrong?" The Cardinals lost. And I'm just like, how is it not bothering you? And I'm sure he was like, "What?
Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah, I know. Like, what did we hire here?
That's funny.
This guy's that messed up.
Oh man!
But now the Cardinals lose, and even when they lost to the Nationals, I realized that was kind of, there was never really a sweat in that series. But I was just kind of like, whatever. Now, had the Blues lost Game 7,
that would have sucked.
Yes, I would have been devastated. I was emotionally leveraged there. If Missouri were ever to get to the college football playoff, in whatever fantasy world we may exist, I'd be emotionally leveraged. But it's just so if I'm engaged in a topic, whatever it might be, and more often than not, it usually isn't something that's involving sports on the ice, floor, field, whatever anymore. Then I can go. But that happens like once every couple of weeks. I don't want to ever fake it. I just don't want to do that.
Because again, I think especially what the audience knows that you're not going to fake bullshit. So I think also whenever they would see that, they'd be like, okay, this is him.
Exactly. I love doing interviews.
Yeah.
I love doing interviews.
I was going to say, you probably feel weirded out being on this side of the mic.
No. Especially with you guys, man. I've known you guys for a few years. I'm thrilled to see what you've built. I feel honored. I feel like this is the Bill Walsh coaching family tree.
We're not trying to sound like a lemming. Doug might hit the gong, but we thought of you first when we put this
am I the first guest?
You're not the first one.
Oh, then fuck you both.
Second, yeah, sorry.
Who was first?
Actually, these guys that started this board game, it's kind of a mix between Cards Against Humanity and Life. It's very intriguing to see in a digital world.
Yeah. So you guys have a piece of it. That's what it sounds like. You guys have a piece of it. That's what that was. That was Iggy's payola for Dr. Biondo.
That's behind the closed doors.
We got equity. We got
something going on.
That's
I can spot that a mile away.
Yeah.
Where do you think, from the landscape of like digitally now, because we've talked about TV and radio and kind of how it's dying a little bit. Obviously, the podcasting thing is on its way up.
Where it's going. It's got to figure out a way to properly monetize it. That's
exactly.
The issue there.
And with the use of social media and video and everything else digitally, where do you think it's going in terms of digital? Since you've seen kind of where the blog stuff's going.
I'll tell you the thing that I would say would probably bore your audience, but now companies are allocating heavier percentages of their budgets for specific digital buys, and to try to make that more mainstream lexicon would be like if a company used to, I'll just use the number like $100,000, if they used to spend 2005, for example, if 30,000 were on print and 40,000 were on TV and 30,000 were on radio, now that would look absolutely different. First off, there wouldn't be $1 allocated for print. They might be off TV. I don't know. It depends on the business. Depends on where they are on radio. But I assure you that there is a healthy percentage, at least a third of that, allocated toward digital. And so what I have found, and what you guys may find or will find, is that if you have digital, just because they have the dollars and they have to spend on digital, you will get bought, even if the audience isn't necessarily, or certainly isn't as big as a television audience. But the spend is a hell of a lot less for the frequency that they'll get on digital versus what they would spend on a television buy. And so I'm aware of that. But I will tell you this, with for example, even TMA, which gets like 300,000 downloads a month, much less the Tim McKernan Show podcast, that even on the scope of that size of download, so 300,000, it still is not even enough to get on the radar of the Blue Apron, LegalZoom, all of those that you hear on the national or global podcasts, when Mark Maron and Joe Rogan are rattling off spots. It needs to be much larger than that. So then what you wind up doing, and what I found, was that you're going to local people and asking them to buy, and what I would find, I don't know what your guys' experience has been, but you'll spend some time, especially in St. Louis, where the people who control the purse strings tend to be a little older than the average age. Like if you were in New York or Chicago or LA or Dallas or Denver or whatever, you're explaining how the podcast works.
Don't even know what a podcast is.
And at that point, you might as well not even continue with the pitch, because it's not going to happen. I'm just angry about it because in 2005, when I was sitting down with people about buying InsideSTL.com, they're like, well, we're in the Post-Dispatch, or we're in the Riverfront Times, or we're in St. Louis Magazine. And now
changed like crazy.
And now it happened really quickly too. And now they would want to buy, not probably InsideSTL.com, but they would want to buy an app or on the app, I should say, or pre-rolls or something like that. So it does change, and and that's the key, is to kind of stand on the cliff and see the wave that is out on the horizon, not the wave that just crashed on the beach.
Yeah, that's the thing, too, is the business. I think also, because we talk about trying to get more sponsors and everything, and we've been blessed enough where we have kind of reached out to people, but we've had more people reach out to us, and some are family friends, some are, this guy knows this guy knows this guy, but they come to us and saying we're interested, and that flatters us, saying, okay, the content's up there, but we always need to do more, and then we've been focusing more on content first than trying to build the sponsorships and everything. My thing is with the sponsorships on a podcast, I don't know if it is good to do, like on your podcast, you, during the conversation, will put the interview in, or I'm sorry, the commercial in while people are listening.
Right.
If you do it all at the beginning, I feel like people just skip, and then that's it.
So,
you know what I mean?
Marin had Brad Pitt and DiCaprio on last week, and I've listened to enough Marins. Maybe I listened to 1 out of 8, I would say, that he puts up. And I know what his move is, as Rogan's is as well, actually. They do it all at the front, and I do the exact same thing.
Skip right over.
Yeah. Get to about 6 minutes and see if they're still going. I don't know. And that's the thing that's, so like, people talk about their downloads, which is great. And it's kind of like when we started InsideSTL.com and you talked about hits. And then it became unique visitors, and then it became page views. And right now people are talking about downloads. When it's all said and done, they all lead to the same centerpiece, and that is return on investment for the advertiser.
Bottom line.
So if you have 1 million downloads, if I have 1 million downloads and you guys have 1,000, but you generated more revenue with your 1,000 versus me and my 1 million, I assure you, you're going to have a hell of a lot more leverage than I will. And that's kind of where I go. And it's not intended to be a shot at, because I'm not going to bother naming any radio stations, because it's not specific to any radio station. But so often you'll hear about ratings for radio, and then you'll hear these people who advertise on our show. Take your pick of whomever, they'll all have the same story. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear the same companies there year after year after year, because they get a return. But you could, why anybody would advertise like on a music station right now? And I say, a music station that's just playing music.
Right.
Let me emphasize that. If you have like 105.7 with Rizzuto, that's a show. That's a huge show. It's the number one show in the market. I get that, but because now anybody who's younger anyway, take your pick, but it's Pandora, Spotify, iTunes, whatever the hell it is, where they're listening to podcasts.
Music,
so you're not,
so many options.
Yeah, so why would you? You're not going to listen in a commercial break. So they're really kind of boxed in. So now they're going into podcasts, but if you're a DJ, you're not necessarily conditioned to fill, like, even a podcast like you guys are doing, or a radio show like we've done, where it's like, it'd be weird if we went to an FM station and they're like, okay, you have 2 minutes before you have to get to the next song. We wouldn't know how to do that, because we've been used to spreading our wings and going an hour, and that's all we know. But to me, fortunately, that is not only the present, but it's the future, because of talk radio generating return, and also because of podcasts. So if you look at the highest paid people in the market, not like there's a place to find that, but I'm pretty confident I have an idea of the highest paid broadcasters in the market. All of them either have a talk show, or their show is kind of like a talk show. And I would use Rizzuto's show as an example of that. And that's because that's content that you cannot find anywhere else. If I were just a DJ, or you guys were just DJs, we'd be replaceable, just like I was when I was at KMOV. It's like I went into the GM's office, and I think I just won 2 Emmys and a Murrow in 2002. And my contract was up in February of 2003. And I'm just like, this is great. I'm going to get like
big raise.
And the GM, who had played 1 million poker hands before, just kind of looks at me, and I was doing radio at that point, so I'm 25 and I'm making a nice amount of money. And he goes, yeah, this is all we can give you. And I go, but I just won the Emmys.
all these awards.
And he goes, yeah, times are tough. Times are always, by the
always
way,
tougher.
No matter where you are, I assure you of this, times will always be tough. It's like right now in 2019, 2020, the economy's never been better, but times are tough. I know it because I've been through it. And I'm like, but I just won these awards. And he's just like, that's what we can do. Because he knows that I'm making radio and TV. This is my hometown. I think I'm 25 or 6. What am I?
He knows you're not going anywhere.
And he knows if I do, he'll be like, okay, well, this guy in Tulsa will cut off his dick to come here and do weekends for $15,000 left. So you never have any leverage. But in radio or in a podcast, and if you become somebody who drives revenue and you go, I'm up and I'm leaving, they're going to go, oh shit.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the difference. And I don't know if there's anybody in television right now and locally, and it's not a shot because there's some sick, talented people, but you just don't have that leverage because you don't mobilize dollars. And that's what dictates. I remember, so the biggest Stern influence isn't necessarily the content, although it's certainly a part of it. And how he does interviews, which I have the greatest admiration for, is I probably learned more of that from like watching Costas and Buck, and now I just happen to love long-form interviews, and Stern gets those, so it makes me love it even more. But I remember there was like a press conference for him, like in the 90s when his show used to be on E! Entertainment Television, and a bunch of local New York reporters came in to the studio and asking him questions like a press conference, not like the Marshall one, but like a real one. There were real people there, and there was really a point.
The satellite trucks there and everything,
yeah. And he goes, look at you all. He goes, you don't generate a return for your stations. You're all replaceable, yet you're all on television thinking you're a big deal. The reality is you're all replaceable. And it probably came off really harsh, but he was 100% right. 100% right. And it doesn't matter. Like even, take your pick of like the best play-by-play person. People are still going to watch, name whatever team or listen to whatever team if that person's not there. It might not be as enjoyable like during the Blues run. I think all of us would have preferred John Kelly and Darren Pang just because they're A, so good, but B, they're our guys. But they're national television rights. So people are going to watch no matter who's calling the game. And God, remember the second round, I think, against the Stars? There were a couple of games where it was
with Pierre McGuire. Yeah, I mean, he just sat there and seemed like he was like all into the Dallas Stars. And then what was it? It was Game 7. Oh, it was Game 7 of San Jose, or Game 6, I guess, when they
were drunk in the box. You don't remember?
I probably don't remember it.
But it's when sweet.
Yeah, he was.
Hashtag
wow,
blessed.
Ball so hard.
I'd love to see it. He was sitting there and I guess talking about, I have every intention of going back to, because there was no Game 7. That's the thing. He goes, I have every intention of going back to San Jose today after this game. They're gonna just basically in his own words say destroy the Blues and all this. And I'm like, why would you say that? Like he said it in his pregame show.
Broadcaster said
Pierre McGuire.
Pierre McGuire said before
he didn't say
Game
destroy.
6.
It was like in a very professional way.
He said he had already booked his ticket to San Jose
in the pregame show. I'm like, what the fuck?
That was as close to a lock as it gets. The Sharks were like dead. They didn't even travel, most of their guys.
Yeah, I mean, so it was just, I don't know how everybody thought about people said it was like an obvious thing that NBC Sports was on the side of whoever the Blues were playing. I didn't fully buy into
that.
I
never get into that. I really never get into that.
When Pierre said that, I was kind of like, okay, that's a little off kilter, but anyway.
Yeah, I think guys like Game 7s. I think they like that.
Yeah.
But as far as guys really polling or ladies polling for teams, I don't know how much that really exists. But that's interesting. I was at that game, not in a luxury suite.
not as blessed.
I mean, what are you going to do? You get offered.
I didn't hear the broadcast.
Everybody comes after me on Facebook Live when I'm doing that.
What is your advice then for especially the younger demographic that's listening, that's getting into the broadcast business? Say you had to go speak at Mizzou J School. What would you tell the students there now? Because a lot of people are replaceable. Maybe not everybody wants to do the 8 years and 6 different cities before they maybe get to St. Louis, which is their hometown. So what would you tell them now?
Caveat emptor, the buyer beware. Be very careful. That's the only Latin I got out of my 4 years of taking it. But Clay wrote something. I'll give him major credit on this. And I can't remember what it was. It was a few years ago, but basically saying, develop your own product, own your own product, and then sell it. And you'll probably make more, but at the very least, you'll be your own boss. And if you're good, you're going to build an audience and you'll own your own content, and then it's your responsibility to essentially be a salesperson. I think one of the things that's really tough, and it wouldn't be for you guys at your particular point in your careers, but for guys who are a little older than me probably, is that all we had to do, or all they had to do, was show up and report or anchor, or show up and host a show. And then all of a sudden here within the last X amount of years, it's become, well, you also need to sell, or if you're not going to sell, you need to introduce the sales staff to clients. And that, now I agree with that, is how you determine worth. If I were to ever own a station again, I would make sure everybody's on board, and that from a legal standpoint I could do it. But I would publish inside the building what each show and or each host is responsible for driving. And I'm talking about dollars.
Sure.
I'll also publish the live stream and the podcast numbers, because what winds up happening, and I think it happens everywhere, in St. Louis is where we are, and so we're more exposed to it, is when somebody gets replaced or fired or whatever the case might be, inevitably the handful of people who might listen to their show goes, oh, you are fucked. You got fucked with the wrong...
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in reality, if the station made a choice, and it wasn't personal, and I certainly would like to think I've never made a business decision based on personal, then you go, well, here. I mean, you know that your show was bringing in this, and that doesn't cut it for what we need. It's not personal.
Yeah.
And you're now a free agent, and if you got anything, then you can go and do it yourself. And in 2020, you don't even need to be on a station.
Yeah.
Just do your own podcast. So I think people in their 20s are aware of that element of it, of the sales element, of the dollar element of it. But I think people perhaps in their 40s, 50s, 60s who, at Missouri when I was in journalism school, they never, ever brought up revenue. I don't even know if I knew what revenue was. I mean, I knew what the word
didn't
was.
Take
but
any
I
business classes. We never had to.
Oh, yeah, we didn't have to.
Right.
Like the difference between revenue and profit, I
Yeah.
had no idea. And I mean, it's supposedly and it is a really good school for that. But for the business of the business, it did not teach you that.
They don't tell you anything behind.
And that's all that
That you're
matters.
only going to make X amount of dollars you can't pay rent for.
Yeah, and it's
But hey, you might be an evening anchor.
Yeah.
and it doesn't
Only making
matter.
$20,000 though. Like
Media business classes would have been, huge. I think I took like one of those, but it wasn't anything like that.
Like Courtney Bryant was in, and she just went to
Atlanta.
And we were talking. It's one of those things where I've discussed, because I was like, okay, everybody thinks I'm probably going crazy about her because she's attractive, but I know that's not really, really, really what it's about. I feel the same way about young Page Views. I don't really consider him attractive. I'm really kind of neither here nor there. But I go, okay, what is this about that I get excited about? Like when I spot, and same thing, when I spot two people like you guys, I'm like, these guys are guys I would hire.
Yeah.
And I guess did, and if I spot young people with talent who get it, that excites me. And so when I saw Courtney anchor for the first time, within 5 seconds, I said to my wife, holy shit.
She's going to be a big deal.
She's going to be, whatever she wants to be, she's going to be. And when Ben, young Page Views, was on, I had no idea who he was. Seymour just booked him just because he saw he had a free Dotem thing on his cubicle. And I'm just like, who is this guy? I guess we'll have him on.
Crazy.
It's nice that we have a guest, so I'll take it and let's see. And within 10 seconds, I'm like, I don't know who this guy is.
He's an animal.
But he is incredibly talented, and so that excites me. That's what it is. That's what my thing is when I spot young people who are talented. That excites me. And what I would add into the talent portion is they have to have a grasp on the business. And like in Ben's case, when we'll be talking, he'll be talking about like the number of shirts or Barstool merch that he's responsible for moving. Or in Courtney's case, and I think this is when we were talking off air, but she had some opportunities that were at the network level, but she was talking about how it just didn't even, like I just assumed like what a baseline was, and I said, did it start with this number? And she goes, oh God, no. And I go, you gotta be kidding me? And I know she's living in New York, and almost having lived there, and that was a while ago. I'm sure it's much, much more expensive now. You can't live there, but yet you're working on network. Now granted, it wasn't like the main anchor. There's a huge disparity between Doug talks about this, between like, take your pick of whomever you want to name on cable news, or making $30 million or whatever, and then like somebody who's like a reporter that might not even be making a few $100,000, but yet they're over in the Middle East or whatever the case might be, and so they're grinding, hoping they get that lottery ticket. In my mind now, for what it is that we do, the lottery ticket is growing a business, owning the business, having it catch, having at least one of the shows catch, and then building an advertising base. That's to me the lottery ticket. And ideally it can build, and then you can replicate it in other markets, and then you can sell it, or you can have something like Barstool where you still own it, but you have Chernin Group, put millions and millions of dollars into it, and now you really have something. Because I think the days, a couple of years ago, my wife and I were talking about it, and it's like, God, you have this thing, and now the podcast is kind of taken, and people are kind of looking at you differently than just like the creep guy on the morning after, like, oh, this guy can do interviews, he can talk politics. And it's like, for other stations in the market, they're like, well, you kind of make too much for us to hire you, and for us to pay. I mean, you can wind up making it because they'll give you cuts of the live reads and the appearances and all that stuff. And it's just like, but then now I'm at a corporation where like even doing this and saying the word fuck might be like, hey, need you calling the office?
Yeah.
And it'd be like, that's just not who I am. And that's the thing. It's not like, oh man, I got to figure out a way to last another 25 years so I can I'm like, if today was the last TMA, I'd be like, all right, we're going to sell the house. It sucks. My family's here and your family's here, Anna Marie, but well, let's go down to Jupiter and, figure out something else to do.
Right.
I'm not consumed with being on radio or television at all. And like I was saying earlier, the way the game needs to be played right now is just not something that I'm really interested in playing. Mm-hmm. At the same time, perhaps because so many people are playing the game right now that way, the fact that I'm choosing or just not playing the game in the more hyperbolic, screaming take or whatever, then maybe that's refreshing for some people. It's like Doug starts doing the FS1 Doug character.
That's the best.
and so screaming about things. And it's just like, we can do it, but we wouldn't be able to do it and stay in character. I wouldn't. Those guys can stay in character. I just start giggling.
Well, it's so funny because anybody that gets it, it's funny. But I imagine there's some listeners out there that would hear that and then be like, "Oh wow, they're hot take artists."
Yeah, it is funny when like occasionally like somebody will text in. And they're like, they just don't fit in with like the hundreds of other texts that are coming in, and they're like kind of serious. I'm like, ooh, I don't think they get the joke. It's refreshing. And then I'll go to look at their text history, and it's like their texts are usually like after 10 o'clock, which means they're texting into
what
like
is this?
Frank's show,
right?
And they tuned into us because the radio was still there from Friday, and they're like, what in the hell?
Like when Frank Opinion read the email.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, how great
that was!
What is this?
So fucking
what
good.
Is this?
Oh my god.
Did you boy pig?
His email of the day. His tone was just classic.
So good. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
There's a talented guy.
Frank Opinion,
he can tell a story better than anybody.
And my dad's been talking about him since I got into just the radio business. Not even getting into the radio business, got into college. He goes, oh, you can talk about Frank Opinion? Like, that's the first name he would say. He loves Frank Opinion.
Oh,
it's like
just crazy. He came in when he came over to KFNS and did our show, and I think he was thinking we're going to ask him about sports, because in his mind he probably never listened to the show, and he's like, it's a sports show. And I'm like, I have zero interest in asking about sports. I just want you to tell me your story. And it's so good, plus his ability to tell a story. It's like Kelly Chase, one of those guys, when they start telling stories, you're just like, oh my god.
That was such a good story about him on the highway.
Wasn't that just unreal?
Unbelievable. When the
Blues won the Cup, that he was on 40 right across from Busch State. I mean,
so cool.
That gives you chills.
I had no idea. I had no idea until he said that. I didn't know that. I wasn't leading up to it. It just, I don't know if he had talked about it before. I knew he went to the Enterprise Center the morning of, but I didn't realize he had driven up from Nashville and was standing on 40 looking at Busch Stadium, where a bunch of people were, and looking at the skyline as the team that, I mean, anytime I would think about the Blues winning the Cup, I would think about Kelly Chase. That's who I would always think about. And that's how he heard it. I mean, it was just... It was kind of better than him being at the Garden.
Yeah.
He's on the side of 40. I mean, that was the
Did
greatest.
he ever say on air or off air that he was like, what are the luck that he steps away from the broadcast booth and then the year after they win the Cup?
No, but he did. We did one in February. Like, he hadn't announced that he was leaving. You might have shot that one, Nick, and he got emotional. I mean, he gets emotional as it is.
Well, he was talking a lot about the Humboldt stuff too.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Yes,
that was right after that stuff happened.
But I said, there's something I would always ask, which I no longer can't ask anymore, which is, what would it be like if this organization ever won a Cup? I remember asking Kerber that, and he goes, "Ooh."
Yeah.
And then Chase, and he just started getting emotional. He goes, it'd be tough if I wasn't on the call, but sometimes it's just time to move on. And he hadn't announced he was leaving yet.
Right. Wow.
And so from that, I remember, I don't know who I said it to, not on the air or anywhere. I go, I wonder if Chase is leaving, because that made me feel like, that he was thinking it might be over. And that wasn't a team, that you were thinking was close to winning a Cup. Even hell, it took nearly 12 months for him to get it going at that point, because that was February of 18, I think, that we did that. Yeah, it was February 18 when we did that interview. And the chances are he leaves and they win the Cup. But he's just as emotionally invested in that thing, and he always will be, which is the thing that made it so cool, is that it meant so much to those alumni. That's what I would always think about. That was the
Bobby
best.
Plager.
Yes.
So neat.
Chase, Plager. Had no idea Hull would enjoy it as much as he did. I'm glad that he did.
We went
Blues.
Blues.
Classic, man. It's so good. God.
Instant.
And then the story about Chase that was on your podcast about how his wife told him, man, can you imagine if you had to go up, because what was it, Armstrong was telling him to go get Hull during the speech, and he goes, his wife goes, can you imagine if he comes up there and drags Brett Hull out there and they start fighting?
Because that's probably what would have happened.
Yeah.
If Chase would have gone out there, drunk Chase would have gone out there to get even drunker Hull on that stage with all the drunk members of the team. They wouldn't have stopped it if those two start wrestling around on the stage.
God.
Oh, that was I had no idea about that story. That was one of my favorite podcasts of all,
funny.
Was Chase.
What has been, I know you've talked about this, you can't pinpoint your favorite, and you wouldn't because there's so many good ones, but which ones stick out to you that you've done so far? And then I was going to ask, which ones would you like to do later, like coming up, that really excites you, that you're like, this would be a great idea and I think we could get them?
I've always said Quinn Snyder is kind of this white whale, but I don't know if he will do it, and be honest, if he would do it.
No way, he's being honest.
I can't imagine, because now he's at a point in the NBA,
Jazz, right?
where he's like, really a well-respected coach. Why would he do it? I mean, it had been Dave Peacock, we got him. It had been Jay Nixon, we got him. Yep. And even with both of those, they couldn't really speak as forthrightly as I think they would if there weren't this litigation.
Right.
Demoff, Kroenke. I think I could get Demoff.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
So.
How much would he say, though? That's the thing.
Well, it's got this. All the litigation has to come to an end.
Yeah.
Because he was, even throughout that process, I mean, you were in contact with him, and he donated.
I have a text from him from inside.
He donated toys to the charity. So he was
3 weeks before that. 3 weeks before that. Vote.
It's not like Kroenke, who's just nobody ever hears from or sees.
Right, but that's the thing. And so Kroenke, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Kevin was following Kroenke's orders.
Yeah,
but I would always say, Kroenke hasn't said anything. Kevin's the one saying things, and now Kevin's the one who people hate,
right?
Because of
Kroenke, because he was the one saying things. Right. But that would be an example. God, I don't know. Those are the ones that stand out. Eric Greitens would be one. Also, see, I don't really think sports-wise. I know. Somebody asked me, "Have you had him on?" Oh, Mark Mantovani asked me. He goes, "You had him on?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "No." I said, "Has anybody had him on?" I don't think anybody's had him on.
Yeah.
He's kind of hiding
he's kind of
before
been
he
under the radar.
reemerges as a cable news host, which I think will probably wind up happening.
Yeah.
So that's the direction that I think. I don't think Paul Goldschmidt had a great year. I mean, because I know he's not a great interview, and that's not. I mean, he's just an introvert. God bless him. It's just not going to be that great of an interview. I bet Wainwright, when he's done playing, will be really good. I feel like La Russa and I kind of need to have a capstone, so to speak. Interview. The first interview I did, because it was May, maybe April of 2000. And I was doing interviews like a fan, not hey, how come you guys didn't pinch hit here? But I'm like, oh my God, I'm with Tony La Russa. I'm 23 years old, and we would do these. We did an hour-long Sports Sunday. You guys even remember the Sports Sundays and Sports Pluses of?
I hear you guys talk about it.
It was the best. I still think it would work. Well, I mean, I guess it does still go on now that I think about it.
Does Doug still do them on Sunday?
Yeah, he loves it, because if an NFL game goes late, then that means he gets pushed back to starting at 11.
The only stuff we had to do
was getting here at 6:50 or something.
With Gervino at KOMU, when we did, I think he did. I don't know what it was called with his Sunday show.
Yeah,
but we had to produce that,
and it's a lot of stuff. But they would want me to do these 5 to 7 minute interviews, and so I asked La Russa, and I think he thought I was just going to go in with the stick mic. And we're in his old Busch Stadium 2 office, and all of a sudden this photographer came over. He was a great photographer, and he starts setting up lights like you guys have, except he dims the lights in Tony's office, and then he's setting up the lights.
I thought about dimming the lights in here.
Oh yeah,
great. Really set the mood.
And Tony goes, "No, what are we doing now here? I thought we were just." And I'm sure he's just like, "Who? You're 20, whatever. Who is this guy?" Yeah. And it happened to be the day I think they did something for Willie McGee, and so it was a fan appreciation thing. I'm pretty sure, because I think he had retired the year before. And Whitey Herzog was there, and I noticed that Whitey Herzog got louder applause than Tony by a comfortable margin, which might sound odd to you guys, but at the time, Tony was not well received.
Right.
And he really wasn't until they won the pennant.
You're saying?
Yeah, in 2000, until they won the pennant in 2004. It was before they won the World Series in 2006. And so my questions were almost like psychoanalysis, which wasn't their intent, but I'm just like, hey, does it bother you today? When Whitey was announced and you're announced, there's some boos for you, but Whitey gets these huge cheers. And, in hindsight, like 20 years, I would never ask that question now, which kind of sucks, but I know I wouldn't.
Right.
Maybe it's self-awareness. I don't know.
Yeah,
probably.
We got done, and he goes, that was some really good questions there. He goes, you're going to be at the network. He goes, that was really, really good. And I'm just like, oh, great. And then Gary Womack was the photographer. He goes, I've never heard anybody ask him those kinds of questions. And I'm just like, well, I feel like that's what people want to know.
Right.
So that's what and that's my same thought process in the podcast. And I can't get enough of it. I love doing interviews, and I don't know why. I always have. And so then that led to, you talked about favorite interviews, interviewing my dad.
Yeah.
Which was something that I didn't really want to do just because I thought we were all going to start weeping. And I didn't want to do that, even though it wouldn't be live and I could edit it. And then a few people emailed me and said, I lost my dad X amount of years ago, and I would do anything to be able to hear him now. So you really ought to do it. And if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your son, do it for your brother's kids. And so I did it. And then that led to saying, God, I'm glad I did it. And I wish I had my grandparents, because they're all gone, and I would love to be able to hear what they had to say. And I said, man, sounds like some kind of like business idea. So if you want me to interview your family members, I'll do it. And now that's turned into like over the last month.
Oh yeah.
I think I've done 15 at this point, and
wow.
there's like I have 2 this week, and they just keep coming in.
It's a lot already. I mean, you just started like a couple weeks ago.
And the thing is, I love doing it.
Yeah.
Because when you're interviewing somebody or their story, you kind of have an idea where it's going to go usually, and and those people also might be protecting some things they're not going to get into, as the case might be. But in these cases, I'm learning as I go, and it's just like a conversation. And then on top of it, it means so much to people after they get them. Not necessarily people who are interviewed, but the family members who booked it.
Yeah.
Because for me now, no matter what, I will always have those 2 hours with my dad that my son and my brother's son and my other brother's daughters will always be able to hear that. And I love that. And that wasn't something I was planning on doing. And if anything, I was planning on not doing it because I just felt like, we both start bawling, and it'd be just super fucking weird.
Right. No, but
that was great.
I didn't get to listen to the whole thing. I listened to part of it, though, and it's neat because you guys obviously connect not only like interviewer, interviewee, but father-son.
Yeah.
It was just cool because you guys opened up about it. And the business idea you had about it was a great idea.
Yeah, it was. I stumbled into that one. InsideSTL kind of stumbled into that, and it's weird how that works. That you can plan and plan and plan and plan and plan something, and it might not take. And then something random while I'm in the middle of doing one of those questions from the audience, I'm like, this doesn't sound like a bad thing. Do people do this? I've looked around now, and in a few like kind of localized spots they do it. But I guess what separates what we're doing is it's in a studio. I have a background, I guess, as an interviewer.
Yeah.
And so it's cool. I love doing it, but I just love doing interviews in general. I love it. But on TMA, I really don't like doing them. That's why we don't have guests.
You got a window.
You got a window, and it's like a press conference.
Yeah.
Like if there were like 5 people on the other side of the table in here right now, it probably wouldn't have any flow to it because it'd be more like a press conference. Like when you're at Columbia and Gabe's asking a question, Matter's asking a question, and then somebody from Canada.
So you don't talk over somebody or
right,
whatever.
And it's like you might have a line that you want to go with, and TJ, you might have a line, and then you're like, oh, and then it stops that, and then it redirects.
Right.
Like, when a conversation, that's not how a conversation goes. You stay on something, and then you wind up. Something triggers you to go, oh yeah, and then what about that? And I love that shit. And I wind up going for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, but because I'm just seriously curious, And then I guess it gets to a point where I'm like, I kind of sense like the person's like, okay, that's it. That's enough. Because you've been in there, I'm like, okay, it's going to be a half hour, 45 minutes, and then it always goes like an hour and 15 minutes. And I just feel like such an asshole.
But they never seem to care.
They never care. Like Courtney came in, Brian, and we had never met. Were you in there for that one?
I think
you were.
For Courtney.
She's like, I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Even like Lux and Learn too, I think.
I had never met Learn. That's another one. Learn would be somebody I would do a show with, by the way, to answer that question.
Columbia, Illinois, proud.
Yeah, she is, isn't she?
Yeah,
Learn, Charlie, Jennings, Plowhawk, Iggy, TJ, Nick.
I'm not out there in the cornfields.
But she stayed because that was, and the reason why is probably because I had never met her before.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in. I guess she was thinking the same thing. it's like, I don't know who this guy is. I mean, I know who he is,
well,
but
you
I've never
found
met.
rapport like halfway through. I mean, obviously joking off Iggy and all his weirdness, but like there was like a flow where at some point in the interview, and it seemed like it happened with a lot of them too, where it's like at some point they got like just comfortable.
Yeah,
like,
and I don't know how that is because you can't teach that, and I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is. I don't. I'd love to be able to like say, here's how you do it, because then I'd be like, oh, good, now I can hire more people.
Well, then everybody could do it.
Right. Yeah. But I don't know what it is. But I remember texting Joe Buck after watching a few. Did you guys ever watch his interview show?
From the Improv Shop?
No. The one that he had on like the HBO? Audience Network.
Yeah, I didn't get to it.
Okay,
no.
and it was, I just thought it was really good. And he goes, oh, thanks. And I go, no. You don't understand. I go, I mean, it's really good. He goes, well, I appreciate it. I go, you don't understand, though. Not everybody can get people to open
relax,
up like that.
that.
And I said, I don't know what it is, but you're doing it. And he goes, I appreciate that. And I don't think he enjoyed it as much because he had to like knock out like 15 in a week.
Yeah.
And
really?
that'd be because he goes out to LA and they just knock him out
while he's there.
That would be rough. Yeah. And then everything kind of had the same format,
because you're not giving every guest the attention they think they need. You're getting tired. And
and it's just like, okay, well, you were born here, and
it's boxed into the same questions.
Exactly. As opposed to,
you're following
what do you think about this? And it's just kind of, I think that kind of wore him out. Plus, he's, got young kids and is calling World Series and Super Bowls. He doesn't need to be doing it, but I love that shit. I love that. Anytime I'm podcasting something, I'll go through this morning when I work out and like, okay, what are the latest interviews that I haven't heard yet? And I cannot wait to just listen to interviews. That's what I love.
What do you listen to besides Stern?
Marin, Holly Randall is my porn podcast, which I realize is super strange, but it's interviews with porn stars and porn directors, and I realize it's absolutely fucking bizarre, but I do. It's right here. Just for
there it is. There it is.
Subscribe
right there. There it is. Oh yeah, you better believe it. No Laying Up podcast, the golf podcast.
Yeah.
I see Conan. Who I don't really enjoy his interview. Do you guys subscribe
I tried
to Conan?
that one. The Wolf Girl one was
and that makes me appreciate Stern's, because they'll have the same guests. Like Stern had Hillary Clinton, and then Conan had Hillary and Chelsea.
Two different interviews.
And I didn't even want to bother listening to the Conan, because I'm just like, he kind of makes it. And Holly Randall, who's my porn interviewer, kind of does the same thing, where they make it about themselves. And like, I've had a few people initially when I first started going, well, I want to hear your opinion on it. And I'm like, I'm interviewing, take your pick of
you're giving the interview.
U.S. Senator. Hey, Jack Danforth, here's what I think about the Iraqi war. Like he's like, oh, thanks for your take.
Thank you.
Guy who didn't graduate from Mizzou, as I went to Yale and was nearly vice president. I hadn't thought of that. I'm not gonna fucking interject my thoughts. So I'm like, I'm gonna get them the ball, and get out of the way. So I don't want to hear that shit. Joe Rogan. I pick and choose on that.
Hey, do you like? It doesn't
Rogan's got to go out.
I like.
I'm not into UFC. You guys UFC guys?
Hit or miss.
Yeah.
I'll bet on it, but
you'll bet on it.
Any other guy, McGregor, and like when the big guys fight, nobody
I'm not into it. So I listen to the Corp.
Corp's good. I enjoyed first season better than season 2.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I don't even recognize the people in here. I see Gronkowski's in there. I haven't listened to that one yet. But the first one was really good, definitely.
Yeah. Part of my take, I dig them because they get them more comfortable and they do ask serious questions.
Yeah.
So I like they had Stone Cold on and they had Gronk. I mean, because Gronk in the Corp, it compared to the Part of My Take interviews, two different conversations.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, I love A-Rod too, but he's got some weird interjections. Like when they had the Danica Patrick one, did you listen to that?
I didn't, but what you're saying, I absolutely know. It's interesting. We all have the same reaction to the Conan and the A-Rod. So I'll be like, okay, A-Rod's going to ask his question. He's going to knock Big Cat off track.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, but Big Cat's obviously going to defer to A-Rod, and so then you have this kind of like, I was interested in that line, but now A-Rod came in with something that clearly was like either handed to him or
scripted off of
and it's just like, this just derailed the whole thing, and it drives me up the fucking wall.
He was on with Danica Patrick, and he kept like weirdly bringing up how hot she was and like her looks, and it was awkward.
It's very 2005 of him. That's how I started my career.
He would sit there and go, now you got all these business ventures, and you are, let's just say, get the elephant out of the room, you are beautiful. And it's like kept going. I'm like, this is fucking weird.
Did he say how beautiful Francesa was? I didn't hear that.
I was surprised. I didn't hear
missed
that
out
one
there.
Francesa was good. I listened to that one too. He's a character.
I love the Francesa drops.
His pizza review with Dave
Francesa
too.
drops
when Portnoy called into that one, so funny. Portnoy called into his show and he goes, "A big fan. I'd love to have you on the pizza review." He goes, "Dave, I have no interest in eating pizza. I have no interest."
And the crowd that shows up for the pizza reviews.
Who are all these people? It's the best.
So good, man. So good.
There's a guy who had to fill I think he did 5.5 hours. I think he started at 1:30 to 6.
That's wild.
Or was that 4.5 hours? 4.5 hours.
Well, it's easy when you're going.
Just taking phone calls.
Well, is it? I think
which is just like unheard of anymore. Like to take
God.
like for his whatever, I don't know, whatever. People perceive our show to be popular, so therefore, okay, fine, we'll operate off the premise that there's a following. For as much of a following as the show has, and we'll get hundreds of texts a show, probably in the 1,000 to 1,200 range. We'll get like 2 phone calls, and it's Mike Lee and like Larry, you know?
That's it. 7 Mike Lees.
Yeah, exactly.
7 different lines.
And it's just like, I mean, the phone call thing is just, it's not, but Francesa, and you're just opening yourself up to any asshole.
And he's so serious.
Yeah, exactly.
Serious sports, too.
It was the best. God, I loved those things.
Yeah,
I'm missing those things.
Pete in Staten Island, and then he comes in and goes, hey, Mike, I want to slap your big butt cheeks. He doesn't know how to react. It's so funny, man. It's so good. God. All right, Tim, one more. We'll get you out of here, man. Just curious, with InsideSTL, just how good you guys have done so far. What do you want to do in the future? I mean, I don't know if you want to put everything out there in front of the curtain, but some ideas maybe the audience might be asking is, what's your next step?
Honestly, there are a few things going on right now, and I honestly have no idea where they're going to go. This past week was one of the strangest weeks of my career in that I had 4 of the 5 days I was interviewing family members, right after the show, and then it would go into, business discussions, and just coming home and, Anna Marie's never been like that. I'll have dinner on the table, taking care of the kid. Like this is like the opening scene of The Godfather, with De Niro and his wife in 1920s New York. But that's kind of what it was, because I came and I would be fried by 7 o'clock because it was just nonstop.
Yeah.
But it's all in the interest of building and seeing opportunity. You don't just build just for the sake of building, because then you're probably going to lose. But I see a couple of different opportunities, but it's got to be right. And that just is, for whatever reason, I can't just sit back. I wish I could. I'm kind of envious of those who can, and just kind of enjoy what I have. I mean, I'm under contract for 2 more years, and can just, my contract says do 7 to 10 and do the podcast, and that's all. But it's, I'm just not wired that way. I wish I was, because then I would just sit back and, relax and probably go to spring training again and hang out and screw off and then come back and then play golf. But, when I left CAMOV, at first all I was doing was playing golf and poker back then. And then it got and people would be like, oh my God, you're 26 or 7, and you're kind of like, all you have to do is work 3 hours and you're making what you're making. It's got to be the greatest thing in the world. I'm like, it sounds like that. And it was, I guess, in one sense, but you're 26, you're 27, and you're only working 3 hours, but it's not like your friends are only working 3 hours, so you're just kind of like sitting there.
Yeah. Right.
And it sounds great. And I remember Edmund saying this, and it was kind of poignant, which I know is never his intent when he talks, but it was intentionally, I think, to kind of give perspective, which was, people think it's so great to retire in your late 30s. And of course, the element of having more money than most people ever even come close to earning is a wonderful thing. He goes, but it can be a little depressing because you're still like in your prime, but you don't really know what to do, have anything to do, and you can get bored. And you probably wouldn't have been in, Nick, when we interviewed Mulder, because that was a phone interview.
No.
But I remember talking to him, and he's just like, yeah, I'm just hanging out at the house. I always watch The Price is Right. And
crazy.
I'm kind of bored, but I'll eventually go out and I'll hit some balls, and it's just kind of like, it sounds great if you're like in a
theory,
vacuum, but then you take a step back and you're like, clearly this guy, and I don't know how Mulder is, probably 41 or something, just like, I don't know what to do. Kids are at school. I don't know really what to do. And it's a weird thing. And so my nature, I don't know. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. I just know it is who I am. Is to, if I see an opportunity, to build on it, and then it consumes me. It's my personality. I was obsessed with poker, just convinced I could win the World Series of Poker, which I guess theoretically I could have, although it's incredibly unlikely. And then it became, for whatever reason, golf. And I got to a point where I guess I got down to like a 6 handicap. But I remember seeing Andy Van Slyke. He's over at Gold's Gym, and he's Mr. Nutrigenics now. So that's a different. We're working off different weights when we're next to each other, as you might imagine. And I go, can you even play golf anymore when you're built like? And he's 62, and he's built like that. And he goes, no, but I don't really care. I'm like, okay. And he goes, well, I mean, I retired and I wanted to play golf and I'd never really played before. And I decided, okay, I'm going to become club champion. And I won club champion. I got down to scratch. And then I'm like, okay, I did that.
What's next?
I'm just like, it's
right.
It's like he can identify because of his genetics what he's going to do. And then it kind of put it in perspective. I'm like, yeah, what am I working toward here? Like, even if I did win the club champ, like, what the fuck? I get like $200 in shop credit? Like, who cares?
Right.
You know, so that kind of gave me the perspective of, okay, why don't I build business, you know, that benefits my wife and my family, as opposed to just like obsess over hitting a 7-iron 175 yards with a gentle draw. I mean, it's just, you know, because you're wasting time.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to you boys. You know, you don't know it until you kind of, I mean, and I'm quote unquote only 43, but then, you know, it does. You'll eventually hear, I'm taking the under on your 5 years on when you have kids. I mean, if I can bet everything on that, I'm all in.
The wife more than
doesn't
me.
matter. It doesn't matter. I'm all in on it. It's going to happen. But that, it, like, especially when I had my son, that's when it like kind of clicks. Maybe that's why when I turned 40, I'm like, who cares? I'm in good shape. I get to screw off. I go to Las Vegas and spring training, and it's the greatest. I don't know why. I'm like, Anna Maria, look at guys who graduated with me from St. Louis U High on Facebook. That guy was in your class because he looks like he's just had the world just beat the fuck out of him.
Yeah, sure.
You know, but that guy probably had kids when he was 23 and has just been, you know, grinding forever, and it's a different deal. But it is weird how it happens so quickly, where you feel like, which you should right now at 25, like you have it all in front of you, because you do. But it's weird how all of a sudden you go, oh shit. Like I remember in 2009 or 2008 even, Nick, I'm going, God, it's been 10 years since I first anchored at KOMU.
Yeah.
I'm like, that feels like just yesterday.
Yeah.
And now it'll be 20 years in like 4 weeks since I was hired at KMOV. 20 years. I
think it's weird. I was talking to Steeples, and they're talking about DeSmet putting in a new turf field, and I'm like, they just put one when I was a sophomore in high school, and he's like, yeah, that was 10 years ago, and I'm like,
Jesus.
Yeah, doesn't that mess you up? We had our 25th high school reunion, and I'm just like, you look at the guys, and I'm sure as you do right now, the guys who are at their 25th reunion, like they're like on their way in their coffins, you know, and then you just go, fuck, it moves. And so and I remember a guy in Little Rock, the main news anchor, saying this to me. That was my first TV job, saying, anytime you get a chance to get money or time, choose time. And I'm like, fuck that. Why would I want money? I mean,
I got plenty of time.
Hardly, exactly. Yeah. And now, and not that I'm saying that now necessarily, but you do have an appreciation. Like, it's like there's these two running balances, and we're all aware, at least most of us are aware of what in our checking account or savings account or whatever, investment accounts. But nobody's really cognizant that every passing day, that day is decreasing your account. And there's nothing you can do about that decreasing, which is why we've always, not always, but the last couple of years gone to spring training, because it's like, we won't always be able to do this. Yeah. And people, I think, save, and they go, okay, well, I'm in my 60s, you know, or 70s. I'll want to make sure I have enough saved so I can do it. And it's kind of like, well, you don't know that you're going to get there.
Right.
You don't know what condition you'll be when you get there. You might not feel like doing it then. So if you can do it, again, this isn't always an all-in thought process. But when you have opportunity, take it and don't just assume. I'll tell you this, regret the things that you did, not the things that you didn't do. That I really do ascribe to that. And it's not a blanket policy, but, you know, take shots. You know, take shots, and if you lose, then fine, fuck it. But at least you played the hand.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to sitting on the sideline with your dick in your hands. You know,
questioning what would have been.
Yeah, what would have been. That's a tough way to go, man. Yeah. So that's the way I'm wired. Which again, would be a lot easier. I think I'd sleep easier and not be as fucking nuts as I am if I could just enjoy things. Yeah. But I'm just wired like, I think this could be huge. You know,
I'm the same way.
I think we're all like
with
that.
Entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, if you have an entrepreneur mindset,
like, I mean, when he came to me after with the whole Birds on the Balcony stuff, you know, he had his show and then asked me to jump on. I'm like, yeah, you know, we'll do it as a hobby. And then a year goes by, and like, I mean, we had a good year and had fun at it, and it's just like, you know, we're like, are we burnt out at all? No, it's great.
Enjoying
it.
We're 24 hours a day if we could.
I do the morning after until I was 80 if I could. You know, I mean, I love doing. I'm lucky though. You know, there's an understanding that this is not like whenever that comes to an end that there'll be another one.
Right.
You know, and I guess it was good that we had those 6 months, or I had those 6 months in 2007 to go, what we took for granted, which was just sitting down, putting on the headphones and going and it working, is not the way that it always works. And it's a good reminder that, you got something that you're really lucky to have here. Don't take it for granted.
Right. Yeah.
Because inevitably, at some point, it might be in the next few months, might be in 20 years, I don't know. But people go, oh, you had that radio show. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But you don't think that while it's going on. And so for whatever reason, there's the presence of mind to go, man, the fact that we've been able to go to spring training and do our stupid show from that picnic table when we have no tie to the organization.
Oh, yeah.
And they let, as a no rights holder tie to the organization, and they let us do that, and they put up with it. And we always do shit that where the team's like, who are these guys? And who's this little
There's always some
producer that's
Joe
running up to us. They're always really underweight producers running
Lance
after
told
them.
us to fuck off.
Yeah,
So
and just and to think that went on during the Matheny and La Russa era, where those are two serious guys.
Oh, yeah.
And they put up with it.
They did, yeah.
And the media relations, put up with it. Loosely. And we were able to do that, and they pay us to go down to Jupiter, Florida in February and screw off.
So cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're just that's just not, you just don't always get that, and it's weird because I've been in the market for 20 years, but I'm only 43, which I realized to you guys, it's like, holy shit, he's 43. You're 18 years away from it, but God, it's like, wow, you're not always going to have this, and so you want to seize on opportunity and try and build.
Yeah.
Because there's always the fear that it's going to come to an end. That's what drives me, which you guys might be like, dude, you're kind of in a position where you're kind of set. Yeah. But in my mind,
you want more.
Yeah. It's not just wanting more, but I want to make sure I take care of that which I can control.
Right.
So I admire you guys taking a shot and building what you're building. Because that's what you got to do in 2020. You have to do that, because the days of somebody going, hey, TJ, Nick, here's a 3-year deal for, take your pick of whatever, and then a 25% increase in year 2, and then a, 25% increase in year 3, no cut deal. That's not the way it works.
Doesn't happen.
These contracts people talk about, which is funny to watch people talk about people's contracts when sometimes they don't even necessarily have them. Like Courtney was saying, for example, she might have a 3-year deal. Well, they have her for 3 years.
Yeah.
They can, and this isn't specific to Courtney, I'm using her as an example, but they can let her go and only pay her 13 weeks. They're revolving contracts for the employee, the on-air, but for the corporation, they have them for 3 years and usually a non-compete afterwards. But because you don't have leverage, you have to go, okay, fine, fuck it, I'll do it, because otherwise I don't get it, and they're going to give it to somebody else who will, because we're all starving for these one jobs. And that's why building your own thing and owning your own thing, it truly is the move. So you're on the right track, and I tip my cap, especially at 25, for having the recognition to do it, because I'm sure a lot of people who are your peers from school are probably chasing the guaranteed paycheck.
Yep.
But inevitably, man, that check doesn't keep going up until you're making $750,000. Yeah,
for sure.
And people are realizing that 2 and 3 and 4 years in, and then realizing, what did I do?
Yeah, and you're stuck. And then all of a sudden, now you're starting over at 28, 29, 30, while your peers in other majors have been accumulating marketable job skills and experience, and now you're starting from square one.
Right.
But there's a good chance at that point, as you're married or you have kids, and now you're starting back at square one, and you're competing against the students who have graduated or may have grad degrees. And that's why this thing, it's great if it works. And me and Doug and the Cat, for as much as we kind of shit on it, realize it worked, and we were very lucky. But we also, that's why we say to people, be careful, because it can be brutal in the sense that you can get whacked whenever, and then if the other station in town won't hire you, then
where are you going to go?
Exactly. Yeah. And are you going to leave town? Are you going to start in a totally new profession? And it's tough, man.
Yeah,
and
that's why you got to.
That's the thing I feel like they should tell students. I feel like it's almost an ethical or moral obligation to say, hey, listen, all of this nat sound pop shit's important.
Really.
And learning how to edit's important.
Oh, yeah.
However, here's the advertising element, and here's the career element, and here's the pyramid, and all of us are getting to play the game here at the base of the pyramid. But within 5 years, maybe a tenth of you will still be able to play the game.
Yeah.
And then in 20 years, 0.05% of you will be able to play the game. And some of you might want to play the game, but they're not going to pay you enough to play the game.
It's all going to be phased out, and something else is going to be going on.
Exactly.
It's always changing, too.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And so that's why when somebody, especially in your age range start something up. I just have a great deal of respect for, because I know it's not easy. I know, because I've started things up, and it's not easy, and it doesn't always work, but you're taking your shot. So I tip my cap, boys.
I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Well, thanks for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully we didn't keep you too long.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. I've enjoyed talking with you.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.